Welcome everyone. This is the SIG Network Policy API meeting, a subgroup to SIG Network. Let's follow the code of conduct and be nice to each other. Today is the 26th of August, 2025. All right, Antonio, you are first on our agenda today. Do you want to share your screen?
Yes, I do.
Should I make a co-host or something? Is that how it works?
Now I can see. Okay, Chrome. Now is this one right? Oh, this is not what I want to do. This is one. Okay, now you see the presentation.
Yes.
Okay, let's start. Okay, so I was on vacation, so that's when I do all these things. And I was talking in the chat and talking with you, Nadia. Oh, we need to test cluster network. No, what is the new name? Cluster network policy.
Yes.
Okay, and then say, okay, now you can do it. And when I was thinking, how can I tell the people to do it? And I went to the code and say, okay, there are like 200 ifs here, that this goes here, this goes the other way, and whatever thing, and the code was a mess. So doing the vibe coding thing, I started to play with the code, say, how can I make this more modular? Because we also had a request from some user, I think that was from Microsoft, to say, oh, you can create an interface, we can do this and the other. Well, I was playing with the idea. And I got far, and I'm really happy how far I got. But let then first introduce what is Q network policy, right? Q network policies was born because we have only one CI with Calico and it started to fail. It was failing for 1 or 2 months, and then we realized that we don't have any way to test if we have network policies, if we regress or not. So one of these projects was created. I was talking with Dan. We thought that was a good idea. We presented and we created the project, right? And clearly scoped to implement our development, right? It's the standard network policies and the work that this working group was doing, because that was the other problem, is we didn't have any way of testing this new development, right? So right now, Q network policies implement standard network policies. It's used in other projects too, and also implements admin network policy and baseline admin network policy. Is, as said before, it's very scope. The goal is to be minimalistic and very focused on correctness and be lean and not adding bloat or unnecessary things. How it works. The trick why this works and is contained and so stable is because it abstracts the data plane and the control plane. It uses this Linux feature that allows you to indicate to divert some traffic to user space, process the traffic in user space, and emit a verdict. This makes that it's possible to implement an architecture like this, right? This is the high-level architecture. When a pod sends a packet, we capture the first packet, we divert to user space, we process the packet in user space, and we emit a verdict. If the verdict is denied, the kernel is going to drop it. If the verdict is accepted, the kernel is going to keep it going through the pipeline. The other thing is that NSTable also allowed to use contracts, so we can say, okay, once we evaluated the packet, we can say that it's valid. I know Dan Witzim had some comments on this, and I think that here, right, we were talking about this. We should also implement that once the network policies changes, we reevaluate the contract state. But I mean, just to mention this, but let's keep this out of this presentation. So what this refactor did? The refactor did something, make the project modular, in the sense that people that want to add new functionality doesn't have to know about NF tables, about NFQ, about all these other things, right? And this is the key of why I'm so happy. there is now, before it was a single controller, everything was in a single controller, a big monolith, everything was in this controller, it processes all the rules, you have a lot of methods and whatever. Right now, there are 4 important pieces. One is the data plane controller. This is only managing NF table, right? So it initializes NF tables and invokes this policy engine, right? This policy engine is the key of the abstraction. We'll get to there later. What else do we have? We have a pod info provider. So we always talked about network policies, L4, L6, L7, and all these things. And well, pod info provider is the abstraction that I found mandatory for implementing network policies at the L4 level, right? So what it does is, once you get an IP, it gives you the pod information required. And what is this pod information required? For all the network policies, we require this pod information. Is pod label, pod name namespace, pod labels, namespace name, namespace labels, and this in admin and control, I think that we also require node name and node labels. Okay, so what I did is I created this proto API that is called pod info, right? So we can, this pod info provider, the only thing that requires is you give an IP and give you all these proto format, because this is the memory comparison. I have some numbers, but it was several orders of magnitude easier if you just plan down these extract than trying to get all the objects and start watching one informer or the other. So this abstraction gives you the aggregation, and later in the presentation you are going to find out what is important. Then this is the policy engine. This is the important thing, right? The policy engine is the abstraction that implements the pipeline. So the pipeline is created by the policy evaluators, and let me read this, how I put this. And the way that it works is you create a policy engine and you configure policy evaluators in some order, and the policy engine is going to go processing the evaluators and processing the output. Once one of these evaluators send a final action, it stops processing and returns the corresponding state. Right? With this, and this is plumbed into the data plane controller. So the data plane controller only needs to pass the packets. The packets need to go to the pod info, the packets go to the policy engine. The policy engine is going to do the discovery with the pod info provider, and then it's going to pass all this information down to the evaluators. So this way, you can see that you only need to implement the policy evaluator. That's what you want to implement. Any new feature, any new network policy that you want, or you want to experiment or whatever, you just need to implement this interface, right? It returns a name, it returns ready. I don't remember why. It returns ready because you need the controller to be ready. So it doesn't start processing packets until it has all the evaluator ready. And these are the two critical methods, right? Evaluate ingress and evaluate egress. So now you can understand some of the questions that I did in the channel, because at the beginning I started evaluating linearly, and then if you don't do in ingress and egress, you reach a condition that you can in one way it gets evaluated, but it doesn't get reevaluated in egress, so it failed. I think that was Nadia, or sorry, I don't remember who clarified this mistake to me. But basically, you implement this and you get down the network packet, that is the tuple plus some payload, and the pod info that I was referring, right? The labels, all the info necessary. So you don't need to have any connection or anything to an external system to evaluate the packet. Then there are these new methods that I added recently. That's the reason of adding this is because, and this was a downwind feedback, is when you have a data plane, you don't want to divert all the traffic. So I needed to make a mechanism for the plugins to tell the data plane which traffic they want to divert, right? So what these methods do is this set data plane sync callback is going to give a function to the policy evaluator implementation to be able to trigger a resync, right? To say resync rules. And during these resync rules, the data plane is going to call manage IPs, right? To say, okay, I'm resyncing which IPs do you want me to divert traffic to, right? So with this is what I noticed, the only thing that you're required to configure a new network policy. We are going to some example later, so you can see that is. Okay, I have an example here. The order of the slides. So you see in the right, you can see an example of a plugin, right? If you just put this plugin into the binary and you put in the policy engine, and it's going to work. It's going to take a list of IPs, and then it's going to say, okay, in manage IP, you can see that I have a Boolean to say divert all, because I tried with some magic IPs, and then I ended with the all zeros means everything, or means the on zeros. So I say, okay, the Boolean is easier to think about. And then you see the logic here, right? It's okay. In Ingress, just always evaluate. If it matches, then deny or accept. And in Ingress, just tell to evaluate in the follow with evaluate. You can see in this pull request, I don't know if I can share this tab. This is the implementation of the cluster network policy. So if you see, I created a plugins folder. So you just, how easy is to implement the logic? Well, it's easy because I reuse a lot of the admin network policy methods, and I don't have to think more about. But you can see that it's 273 lines to have the business logic, and very important to me, you can get a unit test, because it's super complex to debug tests of network policies. I don't know how you do it, but look, it's I spend a lot of time debugging things, but the network policies is something that gets on my mind. And the other thing is that I'm going to cover later is the okay, now you have the feature, how you release the feature. And this is the part that I was talking with Dan 1 hour ago or something, that I ended with this. You basically create a binary. Okay, let me go back to the presentation. So I put a lot of thought on this, because we have the admin network policy, and everything was a monolith, and we have the Q network policies, and I use the Q network policies in Kainet, and people asked me how to vendor this thing, and you end leaking a lot of these problems onto people that just really don't want. So I tried, the first thing that I tried was the Golang modules. And at the beginning was really excited, because it allows you to create a binary and import all the methods and all the things. But then when you start working on that, if you don't compile the binary with the same libraries and all the stuff, you just it doesn't work. So at the end, it forces you to have the code in the same repo, because it's not realistic that you are going to have separate repos and keep syncing all the libraries, especially if you depend on client Go and all the stuff. So after several tries, I ended with this solution, and I'm really happy of confirming that a good signal is that if you read the cap from Adrian and Dan in the kube-proxy IPVS deprecation or something, they come up to a similar solution. So instead of having a monolithic binary, we can have compile time plugins. So the logic is encapsulated, or is well abstracted in the package library, and then people can use the CMD main to create all the necessary imports and build the plugin, right? So this has a lot of benefits. The main drawback is that you need to maintain it, right? It creates, the main file is more complicated and all the stuff, but well, it's boilerplate, so basically it's copy and paste. But the good thing is that you no longer put experimental things with stable things. You no longer have to support something that, if people want to use, I don't know, something that is called Q network policies V1 alpha 1. Okay. Or we can put more prefixes as, oh, experimental, this is going to grow out. Okay, you have a feeling of what you are trying, right? And we don't break the existing standard APIs that we want to support. How this looks like in a real plugin is like this. So basically, you create the only thing that you need to do is this is boilerplate, right? Is to show the flags. These are common flags to configure the data plane. So you need to get client go, you get client go, the informers. All this initialization is depending on the features that you want to do, right? Because that's also important. If you want to do CRDs, you can play with your own CRDs here and don't break or leak the dependencies into the stable API. So you create all the things, and then it's when you start to create the evaluator, right? You create the pipeline. So the first evaluator that I have is the new login policy. So this is just logging the packet. Then, well, these are some interfaces to provide DNS functionality and other things. That's not important here. But then you can see, okay, I create the new cluster network policy, and I say, okay, this is admin tier, right? So then this goes first. After the admin tier, I import the standard network policy, so this goes second. And then I install the baseline tier. Then I initialize the informants, and this is when you put everything to work and say, okay, start with this engine to filter all these IPs and whatever. I think that, okay. So this is, you want to do something and add a new functionality, you see how easy it is. What, in addition to this, what is the other improvement that I added to Q network policies? And this is something that it's an idea that I have just more than 2 years ago, or something. I talked with Wojciech Tysiński, Sig Scalability, and people from etcd. So the main problem of Q network policies and most of the networking components is that they depend on IPs, right? And for depending on IPs, they depend on pods, right? And that is expensive because pods have a lot of churn, and every node watching all the pods in the node is a big penalty on the API server. Maybe not when the cluster is stable, but if the nodes start to restart, that's a huge impact. So what I was talking with Wojciech and people in scalability is, when you have this kind of problem, what do? You used to do this middle proxy architecture, right? It's instead of all the nodes watching to the API server, you put some intermediate proxies where all the nodes can connect to these intermediate proxies, and then all these intermediate proxies can connect to the API server. Well, this is the realization of this idea. This talking with Piotr, what's the name? I never remember the name. One of the etcd maintainers, he was telling me we have a summer of code person working on this, and that's an etcd cache. So they are implementing the informer reflector and all these things with etcd. So I took the idea, I took some of their code, and they put it in motion. So basically, this component, the Kube IP tracker, is the one that implement the pod info provider. So you can have a Q network policy that use the Kube IP tracker client. So you can deploy 2 or 3 deployments of the Q IP tracker master. That is the one that is going to get all the informers with the pods, the nodes, the namespaces, all the labels and everything. It's going to synthesize this. It's going to create the etcd, populate the etcd database with the proto. So the 1 second, I finish and I'm done. The etcd with the proto, and then it's going to have a replication mechanism where the agents can connect to them. And because we have the interface of get pod IP pod info provider, you can swap the informer with this implementation. Now, what would you ask?
Yeah, I think there was some discussion of an idea of doing this in general for like endpoints. I'm also curious, why does even etcd need to be involved? Like, why do you need to persist this?
Oh, okay, that's a good point. Okay, so what's the other problem? The memory. The main problem is that think that you are talking about. These are the scalability tests I was doing.
Anyways, you don't have
no,
much time, so I think this is like.
Oh, okay. So
yeah,
I
we can't resolve it. I'm just pointing out that.
No, the question is fair. The thing is, you don't need all the pod IP information, right? The problem, and I was talking with Dan about this and say, okay, I can put this into a network, and he was telling me, oh, but the network is going to be always slow and reliable. So what they say, okay, I was talking with other people, say it will be ideal to have an informer that store the things in the storage, not in memory. So this is what it is. What I did is I created with the VaultDB, removing etcd, I created the storage has an entire key value store, but I have an LRU cache. So the retrieving the local nodes and the local information is super fast because it's an in-memory cache. You still have all the pod information of the cluster in the same node, and it's not taking a lot of space. Okay, there are numbers here that I was getting with, and you can check on that. The point is that it's about memory consumption. You don't want to waste all the memory because you may connect to this pod or not.
Yes.
Disk, right? I was trying to say disk. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I don't want to derail it because we could just go pretty deep on this conversation. Generally speaking, sounds really cool. I would love to see it in the mainline thing, not just for network policy.
Okay, Surya, I that's another follow up we need to. Surya, you go next, and they answer back. Both.
Yeah. Thanks for the presentation, Antonio. I think this is going to be super useful because it's going to help us easily implement things. I still need to understand the definition of what an agent versus what a plugin is. So I will need to take a look at your repo, because if I want to implement a new feature now, what you're saying is that new feature becomes a new plugin?
So look, I'm socializing this because I'm the point that I'm happy with this, and now I need to discuss widely. So what I ended up is plugin is functionality we as a SIG don't endorse, right? It's experimenting or it's alpha or whatever, right? And there is another package, I don't know what is the name, that contains the same functionality, but it's the standard network policy. So if you want to do a new functionality, my suggestion is you create a plugin, you put the business logic there, and you create your own binary, right? In the CMD, Q network policies, and the name of whatever. So this way, your functionality is completely isolated, it's clear, and it's not going to cause any regression in any of the existing logic.
And the second question I had was with the IP tracker itself, maybe slightly parallel to what Boe was saying. But with regards to having this replace your informer for every plugin, I understand that part pretty smart, that it saves you from having a copy for every single agent or plugin. But then what about the race condition of the update not having been present in that IP tracker cache? Or are we assuming that it's as fast as the original etcd/KPI informer?
Look, the whole Kubernetes
you have a race condition anyways.
Yeah, it's eventual consistent. I
Okay.
mean, you need to play with the tool, right? Is it going to be eventual consistent? Of course, we need to put some things that eventual consistent doesn't mean 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
But I like the idea because I saw, as Bob says, it's not only in network policy. You saw any other project on networking related, they are always with the same problem. Oh, how do I get the pod IP? Some people wanted to add a kubelet endpoint to hook into that, but the thing is, network policies and Kubernetes is you can reach any pod, in any node. So having all the information local, I think that is very valuable. And that's why I created the IP tracker thing. And what I also want you to think, it is something that deserves to be a project in its own, and put more effort on that, to get, some solid base. that's a question that I'm writing here, and I want you to think about that.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
no, I mean it's pretty cool. I think that there is probably a potential for it to be a standalone library if we see this being reusable.
Yeah, I think it's like an interesting thing. Again, it's like going outside of the network policy area, right? It's like historically the project has sort of shied away from not KDES API surface, right? And things attached to it. So this definitely very useful and maybe something the SIG overall should think about. Because I think if it's like, if this is the only thing that's preventing things from just scaling really easily, it's like, why is the project not going in that direction? The other comment is, this looks very much like the Core DNS plugin system, which I think worked pretty well. So that was like a project that kind of has the same software architecture in terms of the plugins and getting compiled.
Yeah, that's another thing that, it's seeing that conclusion and coordinates, and the other thing, it seems that work well is non-contentious and allow the freedom necessary to explore things without breaking the existing, functionality. And this brings to the next thing, right? Is when I was doing this, I could say, okay, now we have all the IPs. I'm switching topics, so because I think that Stefan was here.
Yeah, but I need to drop in 1 minute.
Okay, Stefan, sorry. Okay, well, the thing is, now that we have all the IPs, you can just create the IP tracker to watch different API server, right? So it's going to populate all these IPs, and then it's going to pass all the information of the post to the machine. So it's conceptually easily to create a multi-cluster thing that is able to match in different pods across the cluster, right? But then I started to play with the idea, suggested the label, and I started to implement the label, and look, it's really wrong UX. They have a lot of ambiguity, it's wrong. The good thing is that I had a tool where I can start playing, and we can end in discussions, but I have facts. I can tell you, that's a bad idea. It's that you can, and that's another thing that I was exploring is we have several plugins implementing this, right? We have people commonly saying we want something like this. I want to put the group to think is, do we want to have some sort of solution in the project to solve this problem? We can experiment, right? We can do it alpha, we can do it whatever we want to. We may do it admin external, but I want to have an iterative process that we have, we have now the tools, we have the capacity to experiment with the tools. So I don't want us to get into 2 years discussion of perfection of how this is going to look. And that's why it's important feedback from multi-network, that feedback from Sean and Calico, feedback from all these people that already have this implemented. Do you see that there is a path we can have a minimum standardized that solves this problem? That's my open question. And I covered my 30 minutes, so.
Okay, I guess unless there is some feedback right now, maybe people will take a closer look, and then let's feel free to start a thread in our channel to share your thoughts. Otherwise, Antonio, do you want also to talk about the multi-cluster?
Oh, yeah, that was referred to that.
Yeah.
I did a proposal because I saw this and say, okay, I can match on anything in the cluster. And when I started to implement the label thing, and I started to say, okay, if I put the label, it's confusing. If the label already exists, what does it mean? Then when you start with the cases of allow anything but this cluster, the label is even more confusing. Then one of the reviews from Dan was saying, oh, you cannot put this into the pod selector. It has to be in the namespace selector. Well, I spent these last 2 days doing tests, because the other thing is that we have E2E tests. You go to the repo and you can see the batch tests. You can create multiple clusters. You can implement policies, and you can play the scenario. So this is ideal because of this. It's not that you can put your theory into practice. You can also make it testable. I don't have a good idea on how to implement that. Now I was trying with some kind of annotation, but it still seems hacky. So I don't know if we should. I don't know. I just wanted to know if the group has some idea, if we should end in a CRD based thing.
So I think what I was missing here is like maybe a bit more context on what exactly you're trying to achieve, because I'm afraid we may have our own idea of like how multi-cluster network policy should work, but everyone may have it slightly differently framed in their minds. So
Oh, okay.
is there
So
anything that explains that in like, very specific detail?
no, I can give you the use cases. So the use cases is assume clusters have connectivity between them, right? It can be Submariner or it can be whatever thing, right? People manage to get end-to-end connectivity between pods, right? And you see the pod IP in the other cluster, right? So now people want to implement policies that say, oh, I want to allow traffic from this. And that's the part that I get vague answers. You want to implement policies that say, I want to drop traffic from this cluster or from this namespace on this other cluster or from this other pods in the other cluster, right? That's the part that I don't have very clear yet how it's going to work. I know that Sirion implements something like this. I know that Calico has also something like this. They call it cluster mesh or something. One is CRD based, another is well, I think both are CRD based and both uses special labels to select, if I recall correctly.
Do you want to do that?
Who is somebody was
Sorry,
talking.
someone else was speaking, so please go ahead.
I think in Calico, we just kind of treat it like one big cluster in that you can see, like your policy sees the pods in the other clusters with their namespace labels and their own labels, and you can select on those. But the policy is local to each cluster for kind of blast radius reasons. Like you might update a policy in one cluster, wait to check you haven't broken everything, and then apply the exact same policy to another cluster, and so on. We keep the policy separate, but we kind of make the pods in the other clusters visible. If you're in that mode that you described where you have pod to pod connectivity on the pod IPs. I think that works quite well for our customers who are using the cluster mesh solution. Like I don't think they get tripped up by kind of it all just being merged together. It's possible we add a label that allows you to select the cluster because clusters have names in that arrangement. But I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Yeah, Bowie?
Yeah, I think, thank you, Antonio, for opening this can of worms up again. I think one thing that probably does need a discussion, especially in the context of multi-cluster, just like what specifically are the user journeys, because there's some user journeys where the clusters are like not IP space compatible, and then there are some where there isn't. And yeah, so like some of these things, I think, let's open it up and tackle those, right? Like those things have been sort of discussed at the edges and not necessarily head on. Yeah, so you could get IPs and tack on the metadata, or maybe it has to go through a gateway, and like, what does that mean in that case? Do we support it? Is that a mode that
I want
scope
to
or not?
Bowie, this is something that already exists, right? The requirement is full connectivity. I don't want to go into the whole multi-cluster fleet wide thing because that's never end. So this is a scenario that already Sirion and Calico implement.
Yeah, like there's like a subtlety there where you could have an API that's compatible with both worlds and the users can understand it. And then this would be one implementation, then we'd have some limitations, right? Like, but if then for the other use case, we have like yet another API or, it's not compatible, it feels like there's a lost opportunity. Nadia, you have a hand.
Yeah, first of all, that's kind of what I meant with the fact that it probably needs a bit more detail in what exactly we're trying to implement, because people will come with some different understanding of what should be supported and what we're talking about. The other question I had is, do you want to reuse the network policy API for that? Because I think we've discussed an idea of creating a different API potentially, or like.
Nadia, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just raising the problem here, and I'm looking to work towards a solution together. What I'm saying is the way that I like to approach this solution is a true iteration, right? We have a very common simple case that is already implemented, that is assume flat network connectivity and that you get all the IPs. If you get that, what will be our US that we want? And then we iterate on that, and we decide, oh, this is a bad idea. We go back. But the whole super cluster mesh thing, I don't think that's a solvable problem.
Yeah, okay. No, that makes sense. It's just like your title says here that it's extending network policy. So I'm thinking like if we actually want to change the network policy, do we want to add labels that will change the behavior, or like, yeah, okay.
I'm going to close this. It's confusing. Look, I came with a proposal one night and say, okay, this can make sense. And then I started to work on that, and it doesn't make sense. So I'm going to close it here.
Okay.
Don't get
another
into
idea could be.
Don't get it. That's a bad idea. I'm telling you, that's a bad idea. That doesn't work.
Yeah, but also maybe writing down why it's a bad idea so that we don't get back to it over and over, which happens with us pretty frequently. Also a good idea. Another point is maybe we could try to go with the with our NPAP enhancement proposal process, which is much better, hopefully, than the OCAP. So it's like still a good place to discuss stuff, but also we could iterate on it somewhat quickly, but still have all the use cases and everything we want to implement documented, and all the history of our decisions in the same place.
Sean, those are the right questions. I mean, I don't have answers. That's why I'm bringing it here.
Yeah, no, it's like a suggestion, I guess, for a next step if maybe you want to continue working in that direction. But yeah,
yeah, I definitely think like it's time to open. Well, there is an issue over the bandwidth, so we're currently trying to work through getting admin network policy stabilized. So this might that might preempt this one, at least in the near term. Try to like decide like which one people are going to be focused on. Word of warning. This is definitely something that we should open up though. So like probably it's like the next thing.
Yeah, it also will probably have a lot of very simple questions in the beginning just to add more detail. So maybe a couple of the first couple of iterations will be still doable quickly in parallel with the other things we're doing. Yeah, can't promise, of course. Still better than the original enhancement proposal, right? The cap one. It won't be longer than that. Okay. So do we want to discuss anything else on that topic? We have like 20 minutes left. Or what is the plan? I don't know. Do we continue? Antonio, do you think we should continue with an NPAP and discuss it there in more detail?
Probably encoding in a PEP is like maybe it should be just discussion and like a doc for now.
Yeah.
I just don't, Antonio, I don't want you to like write
too.
a PEP and then just, it's like very expensive to maintain and kind of deal with the
comments. Yeah,
comments.
document is also a good first point. Yeah.
Look, it's a best effort thing, so I don't mind doc or whatever. I just wanted more to get ideas than to get reviews or advices on processes. It's any of you has an idea to say, oh, this can work or whatever, that's more the feedback I was looking for. Once we have an idea and we have iteration and we have stability, that's going to be fast. I mean, we one of the things that we talked is we are not going to wait 2 years to deliver features, right? And that's something that has to change. But what we are not going to do is implement things that doesn't make any sense. The label doesn't make any sense because it's ambiguous and it doesn't work. I have several use cases that break it. So more what I was looking is somebody interested, have some ideas that may work or not, please join and see how far we go. And then when we have some ideas that work, we present them and we debate.
There's a bunch of chat going on, but I'm struggling to understand one person's implicit is another person's explicit, and I'm not sure like what people are. I think it's Bowe saying.
Oh, I was just saying that at least from the
namespace
Istio
the same
experience.
has been mixed feedback. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
So from the Istio experience, Istio had made some strong assumptions, like every namespace is the same and all these things, and that's like security boundary. And what we found in feedback is that like day 0 was easy, and day 2, everyone complained that it was like confusing. So I'm just saying, like, whatever we choose in terms of the policy, we just have to keep that in mind. But that's like more general advice, not specifically towards this thing.
Okay.
Talking about admin network policy, I do want to make sure that since Nadia has her NPAP, that we discuss that before we close the meeting today.
Yep, that was the plan.
Sorry to cut this off, but I think I do want to make sure that we prioritize that, because I think, one, we're on the hook to get it done by KubeCon.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I basically what I was trying to do is figure out what's the plan so that everyone who wants to participate, and Antonio said you're going to close this issue, right? So what's the next place to continue this conversation? And that's what I was trying to figure out.
One interesting
NPAP and a document.
Yeah, so one interesting GitHub feature is the discussions. I don't know if we've ever used it.
Okay.
Look, if there is interest, there are going to be 2-3 people we can follow up in the Slack channel and open a thread. And if we have a thread, we open a meeting or we open whatever thing. So the Slack channel is okay because
share my experience there, Antonio. With
what?
Happy to share my experience with multi-cluster and that sort of stuff.
That's what I'm saying is I know that a lot of you working on this, and I just want to have as I told you, I have an intuition it was really wrong. As soon as I started to implement it, I hit a lot of things. So I was more looking for people with experience. What do you think? It's a bad idea. This doesn't work. Don't fall. I will stop. Oh, we have this thing that may work. I can share and prepare the doc and share with the rest, and we debate and all the things. So it's more about sharing what I achieved. I think that is cool. I think that has use cases, but I don't have clear how to implement it in a way that is reliable, scalable, performance, and all the things that we want.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I also think lots of questions probably will be asked and answered there in the document, so that will be nice. Otherwise, we're all asking kind of the same questions, it feels like. All right. Well, thank you, Antonio, for sharing all the things you've shared with us today. That was really nice. We'll be just waiting for the document and continue the discussion there. For now, I have to jump to this other cluster network policy topic that I have here. I think we are kind of converging. I've been updating this NPAP based on the feedback. So lots of LGTMs are getting lost all the time. So maybe at some point I'll ask you to reapply that. Otherwise, I think I've got 2 LGTMs, and then I also replied to most of your comments, I think. There is one discussion that I wanted to have here about the wording, which
Nadia, maybe just so I think getting towards the beta, which we know there will be just an overall review anyways with like really detailed things. I'm just curious, like, what's our policy on the PRs? Because I think like the faster you can get the PRs in, the faster people can work on smaller bits rather than like a big one. So like I think there was like comments like the specific stuff, but then there was also comments that are like, we should probably just get this in and like iterate quickly. I'm wondering, especially with folks on the call and the folks commenting here, like, should we be biased towards just getting things in and then fixing it with like smaller PRs, just making sure we don't lose track of all the conversations versus like trying to do it all in one like perfect thing, which I think is a strategy, but it's going to take way more time. Like it's hard to parallelize, right? Because it's like, Nadia, like you have to update this PR.
Yeah. No, I don't think we're going anywhere close to being perfect here anyway. It's just like there is a balance also. You don't want to merge like the first version you see also, right? So basically whenever people feel like they can LGTM that, it's good enough. But also here in our meetings, we discuss our timelines. And I think with this PR specifically, we really want to get it merged in the next couple of weeks. And it also seems reasonable with the couple of LGTMs I've already got. So that's basically the question. I think it's almost ready to be merged. And then unless there are major changes that need to be done at this point for this specific PR, I would say it's time to default to iterate later, but there is no generic rule, I don't think.
Dan has a
How
hand.
soon to get to that option? Yeah, Dan?
I'm happy to LGTM and approve it right now. I have the comment typed out already. Anyone object? Right.
I guess
I
not.
object. No, sorry.
I like how stuff gets merged during the meeting all the time. That's an interesting
So this means
tendency
that
we have.
Nadia, this means that we need to merge the implementation
Uh,
and the conformance
Yeah,
test?
we can. So yeah, as soon as this is merged, you can merge the implementation, and then there is another PR with the updated test that I already have that I ran manually with your implementation to confirm that it works, because otherwise you have no way to test your changes.
Okay, we think
Yeah. So
offline,
I think it
and
goes.
you tell me
thank
the
you.
next steps. I
Okay.
you tell me what to do.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. But yeah, also with everyone else, just that the plan is basically then Antonio already has an implementation, so he will merge that. That means the next step is I can merge my tests update to switch to using cluster network policy in our conformance testing. And yeah, as I said, I checked it, the tests are passing, but that's a separate PR to also be reviewed later.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I need somebody to review the implementation in QNetwork policy, right?
The AI generated one.
Yeah, I reviewed
That's the most
AI
difficult to
thing
review.
like 10 times, but it always keeps adding bugs. So, and the problem
Antonio,
is that
I'll only review the prompts.
I ran the
No,
tests, so
I
you see we've done what we could.
I always am confusing with the selectors and the defaults, and I always am asking Dan. So I need someone like this. What happens if it's an AP and it's not a pod and it has a selector? These kind of things are confusing for me, and I need more help on that. The other code I almost review with it, but more about the fundamentals and this knowledge about network policies. I need some of you to take a look to the PR.
Okay, yeah, Antonio, I'll try to take a look at that, but yeah, I'll see how much time it's gonna take and how much I can review. But I'll make an effort at least. Okay, so then considering we've merged everything anyway, but on iterating, I still have this discussion I wanted to bring up that we actually started talking about with Dan. So now we have discussed the priority many times. We all know that higher priority meaning lower value is kind of confusing, but my understanding was considering that that's the field name we agreed on, and then we also ran a little poll during the previous KubeCon, so people seem to understand what lower priority means in general. I'm trying to figure out if
Stop. You lower priority. Do you mean?
Yeah.
Did you put backticks around the word priority in that sentence? Like it completely changes what you're saying.
How backticks change what I'm saying?
Because
value doesn't mean, even with the ticks, lower priority still, yeah. Okay, I guess without the ticks then. Lower priority means higher value, bigger number.
Right. We
Yeah.
agreed to keep priority because it's the standard, but I think it works better in English sentences to just say lower precedence and higher precedence rather than saying lower priority and expecting people to translate that to higher values of the priority field.
Okay, that's exactly the conversation I want to have. Yeah, Bowie, you seem to have an opinion.
Yeah, I think like, especially with the AI being trained on like the internet, like unfortunately this ship has sailed. Like the industry has used priority, but then given the numeric values of like lower to be higher precedence. Just on a completely unrelated note, like what does the word dust mean in English? Does it mean to remove dust or add dust? You know, like some of these things it's like really hard to fix. Like we can't like fix it. That's my
Yeah,
opinion.
I guess the question is what we want to use in our API. So the priority as a field exists, but the question is, do we want to ever use lower priority as just words without any ticks or whatever?
I agree with Dan.
Or
Like if
do we always say then higher, lower precedence, and we basically never use the word priority except in the field name?
So I would say, like, I agree with Dan. Like, if we are just consistent in our documentation, then at least that forms like a little, like a little local area where people have the right expectations from the description.
Yeah. So I think my only kind of problem with that was that we use word precedence to describe how tiers behave according to one another and how the priority field also works. So priority defines precedence and tiers also define precedence altogether. So at some
Well, I think
point I
that's
felt like
fine.
using lower priority is more specific because it works within one tier, at least in, well, my mind and I guess in real life. Versus when you say lower precedence, that could mean both. But again, I mean, if that's just me and everyone else thinks it's fine.
My general take on this is that I think you're looking at it very closely, and most readers of our documentation probably won't even understand the distinction, I guess. So that's all. Like again, that's like in my opinion of like, I think as long as we're consistent and clear, it should be okay. Because people have dealt with worse.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that sounds, unless anyone else has different opinions, I will just stick to trying and use using precedence everywhere. Well, which is the next follow-up now, I guess.
Yeah, just like if we're consistent and clear, I think that meets the 80% bar, and the 20% is going to be really hard to get perfect.
Okay, sounds good. We just leave the field then, but yeah, we also need to, I guess, stay consistent in all our talks, and people are confused already, so we should try to stick to
I think that was one
wording.
of the things that like we merge your PR, then we can start working on the docs. Is actually where I'm like concerned about. Fixing all the
Well,
docs.
okay, that's considering the PR is merged. That's the next question. So how do we plan that? Because I have my plan of action for the NPAP itself, where like then the tests are coming up, and then maybe docs change. Okay, but these like do little improvements on the docs of the CRD. It's not like a predefined list of things. Maybe there are 0 things to be done there. So
of all the comments here on this one, maybe just go through them and then just write as a comment on this PR, like what remains, and then we could go off of that and just send the follow-up PRs to kind of like take care of those. And I was thinking more of like the human docs, like the rest of the documentation in the project, like those need to be
that's another
updated.
thing.
And I think like that one we could take a look. Like, do you want to just pull it up really quick to see if there's like chunks that could be split off and then people work on separate things, or like how do we want to do it?
On the human docs on our web page, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, well, no, I can't split it right now, but basically everything needs to be changed, which is
Yeah,
an
yeah. So
interesting
I'm saying,
task
like, can
anyway.
we pull up can we just look at the structure of it? Is there some like obvious division where we could just say like, hey, one person fix this one person fix this one, and then kind of have it like separate pieces?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't think it makes sense to do that right now, but let me try to do that offline and then see.
Okay, because I think like the
If we can
more separate
reasonably
pieces
split
that people
that.
can work on simultaneously, even one person
Yeah.
like having multiple PRs, that would probably be the best in terms of making progress.
Yeah, that's definitely a good idea. There is a chance we'll need to start with one of them though, but yeah, I need to see what can be properly split into parallel pieces. Another point is there were a couple of dependent PRs like changing accept, allow to accept, and then
That's on me.
doing the port changes, I think also was waiting on this PR. So now this whole work can also get started.
Right.
Yeah, that's just another note. I hope we'll get back to our project board next time to track any progress. And I think we also wanted to add some conformance tests issues, like reopen some of the stale ones or something, Surya. Is that right? Did we plan to do that?
Yeah, I think we wanted to do it in the next meeting, which was maybe today.
Oh,
but
during
then
the
we'll
meeting
do it in
itself,
the-
you mean, not offline? Okay.
No, not to reopen the issues, but then to bring forth the reopened issues or something. But we can also do that in the next meeting.
Yeah, I guess the only problem was that some issues were auto-closed, and then the idea was to try and look at the ones that are actually not stale and reopen them, and then we'll like be able to assign them. Okay, let's try to do that next time. Okay, then we are out of time now. I think we have a plan. I'll send a message on the follow-up for the docs update to our channel and see if we can find any assignees. If not, we will discuss that on the next meeting. Thank you all. That's some good progress. Some stuff merged again. Yay. Bye.